On this Wednesday night, I'm John Fanta. We've got the coach, Steve Prohm, with us. We've got Sean Paul, the mid-major master, who will have a big preview of a major encounter tomorrow. That's coming up on tonight's show. We'll also talk about the Crimson Tide of Alabama, how Jaden Shackelford, Javon Quinterly and company came out with a big road win at Florida this evening. Plus, Jay Wright makes a little history, and the Fighting Irish on the cusp of a major win in the ACC, an ACC that is a total mystery after Duke. How many teams can say they've beaten Kentucky and North Carolina in the same season? We might just be talking about that in mere moments. Let's jump in right now. Steve, we've been watching this Notre Dame North Carolina game. And as Notre Dame's on the cusp here, how have they been able to do it?
But if they can hang on and win this, it's a huge win. It'd be a huge win. Anytime you can beat North Carolina, like we were talking off air, is huge. You beat Carolina, whether it's home, road, you beat Duke, home, road in that league. That's a big feather in your cap, especially early in the year where everybody's trying to jockey for position right now in the ACC and find an identity. Who's going to be number 2? Who's going to be number 3? Who's going to be number 4? And then you look at, Notre Dame's resume right now. I know their overall record maybe 8-6 after tonight, but they've got a win over Kentucky now, and they're about to have a win over North Carolina. And so Mike Bray, I think when you look at the longevity success he's had, he's done a phenomenal job, and it's a huge win for them.
Sean, your instant takeaways. What is wrong with North Carolina?
I mean, simply put, it's been the issue all season. They just can't defend, and that continues to be a problem. They have the offensive pieces to be really good, but they have to show some effort on the defensive end, and they just haven't all year. They've left shooters. They aren't very physical, and that's something they're going to have to figure out if they're going to even make the tournament or win any games in the tournament. It's a big problem for them right now.
I'm going to tell you right now, right off the top here, matters this. The standard that is North Carolina basketball has not been lived up to at all in year one of the Hubert Davis tenure thus far. And it comes from an effort standpoint. On the defensive end of the floor, North Carolina is not making an effort. They're just not getting it done. You give up 13 three-pointers tonight to Notre Dame. The perimeter defense, the idea of a closeout in Chapel Hill, open up the basketball dictionary and start to get reacquainted to some of the fundamentals. Because I just don't understand. I didn't understand what North Carolina was doing defensively earlier in the year against different competition. This was back when they played Purdue at Mohegan Sun, and Purdue ended up pulling away because Purdue was getting wide open looks. And then Tennessee ended up getting those same looks. And that's been the theme here for North Carolina this year is on the defensive end of the floor, they don't seem to have much connectivity. They've got weapons. They've got guys that can score the basketball. But like when you're in January, Steve, I'm curious if you've had a team that maybe is not where you'd like it to be on the defensive end of the floor. How do you get them better when we're already flipping the calendar to January and you're in your league?
Yeah, it's tough. That's it there when you look at that. I mean, the one thing is you got to hold guys accountable. You maybe shorten your bench or take guys out if it's, struggling on the defensive end or giving up baskets. When you find your identity is really, can you win big games on the road? That's when you find out about your toughness. That's where you find out how you guys are going to compete. Can you win on the road? Can you make big plays? Can you get big stops on the road in tough environments? And, it's hard to win on the road in the ACC, but, Carolina, they've had some tough losses. When you look at, we talked about before, Kentucky, Purdue, even you touched on some teams early in the year. Brown scored a ton of points on them. That game, in Brown, they run a lot of very skilled offense, spread you out, can shoot the basketball, but they scored a bunch of points. And so, Carolina, the thing, Hubert Davis was a phenomenal player and has done a great job, there as an assistant there at Carolina. He understands what Carolina is all about. And so, he's got the players' best interest at heart. He's invested in those kids.
Of course.
And so that's the thing. That's from a coach's standpoint, that's where it starts questioning, man, why can't we do this? But the one thing you find out, and we've talked about this before on air, is, the great teams have an identity. You have an identity, and especially, you look at these teams now. If you can defend, you've got a chance every night. And, I think that's got to be a big, big building block, for teams to be successful over the long haul.
Sean, you have a thought?
I mean, I just don't really know where they go from here, because their best win's probably against Michigan. Michigan's clearly not very good.
It's not a good win.
Yeah, like that.
It's not a good win anymore.
They have no quality wins. And let's say if they lose to some of the bottom teams in the ACC, and there's some bad teams in the ACC, like if you lose to Pittsburgh, or if you lose to another team near the bottom of the ACC, we're having an entirely different conversation about the Tar Heels a month from now. Like, are they even going to make the NCAA tournament? And you think about what the North Carolina program is. Obviously, it's one of the best in college basketball. 2 years ago, they were terrible. They wouldn't have made the NCAA tournament. Last year, Brad Davison drops 30 on them, and they lose in the first round of the tournament. And this year, they're probably a bubble team. It's been a rough 3 years for North Carolina, and I think they really need to find a way to get back to the top of college basketball.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing too, man. It's just Carolina is Carolina, and we all know that. And obviously you're replacing a guy like Roy Williams, and the tradition, the longevity, success. But Carolina is expected to play for Final Fours and play to get to Final Fours and win national championships. That's just the reality. And, right now, when you look, we talked about this Sunday, when you look at their schedule coming up, what is a top 25, top 50 win that can move the needle and really make them a true NCAA tournament team, which we're going to get into this later, that you would put them into the field over Loyola, over San Francisco, over a Belmont or Murray State if they continue to have great years. You got to look at that, because what's their best win? We said it's Michigan, and obviously Michigan's 7-6, and then they've got a great opportunity, Michigan, to turn it around and get it back going with Michigan State this week. But, it's tough right now.
I'm going to challenge both you guys here with a big question right here. I'm going to separate these two sets of three. Some math here, basic math.
I'm bad at math.
3 programs aside here. Not 3-on-3, more about who you're taking. You're taking one set of these 3. And you can't just think about this season. Because, Steve, you coached against them. You coached against him. You understand what they've built. But I'm curious here. If you had to take 3 programs out of these 2 sets over the next 5 years, I'm giving you on one side Gonzaga, Scott Drew and Baylor, and Villanova. On the other side, I'm giving you Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky. If you have to pick one set of those 3, who you taking? And you'll know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, you want to take it first, Sean? I'll follow up behind you.
Yeah, I'll go with Gonzaga, Baylor, and Villanova, because what have they done recently? They've been to national championships quite often. The other sides have too. Kentucky's won one in the last decade. North Carolina's been there twice. But
1-2.
Yeah. And what it comes down to for me is what those other teams are doing recruiting wise. We've seen a lot of other schools really get into the realm of getting top 10 recruits. You look at Oklahoma State, they're not going to do that consistently, but Gonzaga is starting to do that consistently. Baylor's starting to do that consistently. They're adding Keontae George next year, who's a top 5 recruit in next year's class. And Villanova, while they don't really recruit to that level, they always get some good top 50 guys, not really top 10 guys. But what Jay Wright's built there is something that's always going to be a success. So I would take that group because they're recruiting at a high level. They all have consistent programs, and they've all won a lot recently. So that's why I'd pick that side.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you, and I would take that side, but I think it's twofold. Number one, the way we measure Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky is totally different than the way we look at so many other programs. Those programs are looked at as, did they make the Final Four? Did they win national championships? And those guys have had a lot of one and dones, and guys in and out of the programs over the last several years. And that's just, been part of the makeup. But I think the standard that we hold those three programs to, and deservedly so, is extremely, extremely high. Gonzaga's been good for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Baylor's been good for a long, long time under Scott Drew. But what they've done is they've gone from the Sweet 16 Elite 8 level to a national championship Final Four contender. I mean, he's been to Sweet 16s. He's been to Elite 8s. He's had several NBA players come through there. And then you look at Villanova, we talked about them a couple weeks ago. What's wrong with Villanova? And someone sent me a stat before I went on air. Man, nothing's wrong with Villanova. The numbers right now that Villanova had 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we talked about them, is the exact same that they had last year to this year. And that's why they said just stay the course with Villanova, and they'll end up being either the top or one of the top 2 teams in the Big East, which it's playing out like that right now. But if you're betting on a team on a 3 parlay right now, you're taking Gonzaga, Baylor, and Villanova right now. I am.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Sean is too, and you are too, or you wouldn't have asked the question.
The sport has changed, and the way that winning is done has changed. Now, that's not to say that these programs haven't adapted already. John Calipari went out and adapted. He brought in some impact transfers. Callan Grady, Oscar Tshiebwe. Tshiebwe looks like an All-American caliber player. Kentucky also last night played well. It hurts that Severe Wheeler and Ty Washington go down in that game. Things might very well go differently in Baton Rouge, but LSU pulls out the win, and that's how life goes. It's not to say that Duke isn't going to sustain things and perhaps even usher themselves into a different era under John Shire. Coach K would fully admit he's gotten to a point where the retirement is the retirement. All things come to an end. That's not a knock. It's just the reality of the situation. And he's handing the keys off to someone that he had to sign off on. Of course, he had his good graces with the idea that John Shire's going to take the torch. But by the same token, the way that Scott Drew has things going down in Waco, Villanova's on a run in the Big East in terms of the regular season championship run they've been on, like Kansas was when they won 12 consecutive Big 12 regular season championships. Villanova's won all but one of the last 8. And I bet you that they'll end up winning the regular season again this year. If I had to bet, they've answered the bell here and they've won 3 straight games, and they have a nice window in their schedule coming up. We'll get to them in a second. The other program, Gonzaga, the only thing from the fans' narrative and from narrative standpoint, the only thing left to do is to hoist that national championship trophy. But we sometimes don't fully understand just how, one, hard it is to win that.
Only one team can do it.
Only one team could do it. And 2, just how good, Steve, they've been over the last decade and change.
Well, I mean, Mark Few's been to the NCAA tournament every single year he's been a head coach. And Dan Monson obviously got it going, and then Mark Few's just taken it and ran with the torch. But, the thing is what we're measuring Kentucky into, we look at the team in 2012, Anthony Davis and that group, and the team he had a couple years later that was just, built with talent and players and phenomenal, teams. And then you look at the teams like Carolina when, had McCants and Sean May and, Raymond Felton and all those guys. I mean, and then you got the Hansboroughs and Ty Lawson team, those were like, legit Carolina, Kentucky. And you think of some of the Duke teams, of recent that won their national championships. That's what we're measuring these Kentucky and Carolina teams to, and they're not that right now. I mean, that's just the reality.
I do think it's almost good for college basketball, though, that there's other teams that are stepping up and being some of the better programs in college basketball. Because you look at the college football side of things, it's going to be Alabama. It's going to be Georgia. It's going to be, not right now, but LSU is usually somewhere in the mix. It's going to be Clemson. Those are the teams you expect to be there. I feel like if you asked someone 5 years ago, would Baylor win a national title in the next 5 years? I don't think that many people would have said yes.
Right. It's true. It's true. The sport has shifted. It's a good thing. It's good to see other teams. I love what the SEC has turned into. The depth of that league between programs that are big names and some programs that have now evolved and are in that conversation to win it all this year. If not, gets that Sweet 16 or Elite 8. Let's jump into this stuff. You brought up Villanova just moments ago, and we'll get to Alabama's win over Florida in a little bit. Jay Wright notches his 500th win tonight as the head coach of the Villanova Wildcats. The Hall of Famer getting it done, and it comes with sweet revenge. 19 days after Greg McDermott's Creighton Blue Jays blitz Villanova by 20, tonight your final score, Villanova 75, Creighton 41. Now, we'll turn to the game in a moment, but I want to get the coach's perspective. Steve, Jay Wright, 2 out of the last 5 national championships, 500 wins at a small Catholic school outside of Philadelphia, enrollment around 6,000 students. And here he is with no intention of leaving. This is his home. They do nothing but seem to win and produce NBA talent. What do you see in Jay Wright that has led him to 500 wins at a school that at one point there was pressure to win more? He just fought right through and is going to go down as one of the greats in the history of our sport.
Yeah, first off, congratulations to him. 500 wins is an amazing feat in our business, in the college basketball profession, coaching profession, was just a part of the Olympic staff this summer, part of a gold medal staff. You to mention 2-time national championships. And the one thing, if you really go, I think there was an article they wrote in Sports Illustrated several years back. He kind of went through a pivotal point there at Villanova. And I don't know all the details of it to go into it too much, but you shaking your head. So the article they talked about. To where, hey, was he getting away in recruiting from his identity? From what he was about, what Villanova basketball was about. And, they had maybe a 2-year window where they weren't up to the par of what Villanova basketball was supposed to be. He was patient, administration was patient, and he got back to who he was and recruited to certain people that fit him and his system. And you can look at now and you can say, that guy right there, he's a Villanova guy. And when you start saying that about certain recruits, then your program has arrived. Your program, not just because they've won national championships, but your program has arrived. Your program has an identity. What the head coach wants, and then he's done a great job. He's been able to get his assistants. A lot of guys now getting head coaching opportunities because of their success. And you can see, man, he embraces that Big Five, Philly, Pennsylvania, lifestyle. I was texting with my former players the other day. George Niang plays with the Sixers. And I was like, what I know about Philly, it's a tough sports town, but man, it's a great sports town. And they love a winner, and they going to be right there in the corner with you. And I think he understands that. He embraces that. And he just has a demeanor. Brad Stevens has it. He's got it. He has a phenomenal demeanor. The only thing different this year, he's not in them really, really nice suits. You know what I mean? He's in, and I got the Philly Sixer sweat, maybe wore for him tonight. And so I think that's it, man. I just think, he's surrounded himself with really good people. He's at a phenomenal, when you grew up on the real Big East, and I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I remember watching Villanova and North Georgetown in 85 play for the national title. He understands it. He did a great job at Hofstra, and now he's off and running. He's already in the Hall of Fame, and he's done an amazing job, and he's a great one to look up to because so many people study what they do offensively now because of the fundamental nature that these kids play with.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. They have been able to develop a model of consistency that really nobody has been able to come close to from an offensive standpoint in this sport, especially over the last half decade. Sean, they win the game by 34 tonight. 34. They beat Creighton 75-41. It's a Creighton team that was 10-3, that was 2-0 in the Big East. They've exceeded our expectations. But man, revenge it means something. They'll say it doesn't. It's human nature. 19 days ago, Villanova got their clocks clean. Tonight they sent a message. What did you see that they did that led them to such a dominant win?
I think you touching on the revenge factor definitely played a role here because they allowed them to 41 points. Creighton went 3 of 24 from 3. They shot 12% from 3. They shot the ball pretty well from deep the first time. So Villanova took that away from them. And Creighton's a pretty young team. So they were still shooting the 3. They were trying to rely on that 3 ball and it just wasn't going down. And when you're looking at the age difference between Creighton and Villanova, it's massive because you have Colin Gillespie. He's a 5th-year senior. You have Justin Moore. He's a junior. You have Jermaine Samuels. He's an extra year senior. Brandon Slater. He's a senior. Eric Dixon, sophomore. He's a sophomore. So then you compare it to Creighton. You have Ryan Hawkins, who's pretty old. You have Alex O'Connell, who's pretty old. Ryan Kalkbrenner is a sophomore. And then the other 2 starters are freshmen. And a lot of the bench are young guys too. So when Villanova, with the program they have, with the identity they have, they're going to beat those younger teams because they know how to win games already. They've done it at this program for a long time. And while Creighton's trying to figure out with this younger team how they're going to do that.
And I looked at the score late. And they're up big. I think Gillespie had 0 points.
Big. Actually, a telling night for Villanova. I mean, Colin Gillespie had 21 on Saturday in the win over Seton Hall. And it felt like if he was off at all, it really hurt them. So this was a step. And the biggest thing for me is Jermaine Samuels is starting to come on. Mm-hmm. He had 11-11 at Seton Hall on Saturday. Tonight he goes for 18-7 on 6 of 11 from the field. Samuels has not been as strong as they would like him to be earlier this season. He was averaging just around 10 points per game coming into tonight. The fact is they expect him to be a 15, 16 point per game guy. And they need it because they lost Jeremiah Robinson Earl to the NBA draft.
Yeah.
So you bring back a super senior. I thought Samuels was big tonight. And that's telling, Steve, that they didn't need Gillespie to be his best self and they could win the way they did.
No question. And the one thing we touched on when we talked about Villanova a couple of weeks ago, I mean, their schedule. I mean, I know they're 9-4, 10-4, whatever. I mean, they went and played at Baylor. Now, that was the Big East, Big 12 challenge, so they had to go there. They schedule a home and home with UCLA, and they go play them after UCLA is coming off a Final Four appearance. You know, that's 2 of their 4 losses, you know, and then they lose, you know, which obviously we talked about the Creighton loss, and then we're missing one. Purdue. You know, which everybody knows how good Purdue is.
And they led that game for a good portion.
And that's what I said. They were up 10, right? They were up
10. UCLA too.
You know,
they were in the driver's seat against UCLA.
You know, and had to come back. And so, but I think the one telling point with Villanova that when you were asking that question, I think that they're at the point where they're, like I said, when they're recruiting, hey, he doesn't fit us. We don't want him. And some people may be like, you don't want that guy? And they're like, no, he don't fit us. He doesn't fit Villanova basketball. He doesn't fit the core values of Villanova basketball. You know, whatever they are. I don't know what they are, you know, but he doesn't fit us. But this guy right here, and you may be like, man, you sure? And 3 years later, Brandon Slater. 4 years later, a major impact. But how many guys in his situation would have transferred? You know? But they had the right guy that understands what he's at, where he's at, and why he's there, and what the end game is. And that's huge.
Coach, when you were coming up in the coaching ranks, and you'd be around the recruiting trail or you'd be looking around, like, is there a legend or is there a big name or a mentor to you that you think about that kind of you looked at as, yeah, he knows how to recruit because he doesn't settle. He doesn't go for just necessarily the stars next to a name. He goes for his guys.
I think I've learned that more now as I've gotten older, you know, especially now after becoming a head coach, you know, and obviously being, you know, I've seen good, bad, ugly. I've seen it all as a head coach. And so I think after, you know, going through it as a head coach, I think you learn that even more. Hey, you know, what fits, what doesn't fit, you know, and understand that there's different ways to win. from that standpoint. But I mean, you could name several coaches. Obviously, you've got to have good players to win. That helps. But you also have to have players that fit you and fit your system and what your program, your university, and what you stand for. And he's done an amazing job with that, without a doubt. And, he's a guy that, when they won the national championship, I knew it was going to my fourth year at Iowa State. I knew we had a chance to be good. But that whole summer we worked with guys. It was all fundamentals. It was all 2 feet jump stops. It was all driving kicks, playing off 2 feet. But it was all the stuff that you had studied watching Villanova make their run to that national championship that year. And it paid dividends for that team going into that year with that group. We had a good group that year. So, but there's several. I mean, even, that you look up to and but even like Rick Pitino, I mean, he's as great of a coach he's won a lot different ways, with, and even guys at Louisville that, it's not just, 7th pick, 9th pick, 11th pick, 13th pick, you know what I mean? He's been able to win, a lot of different ways. And, now I go back when I was a manager at Kentucky, man, his team in 96, I was sitting ringside watching them. They were, holy smokes, were they good. But he's done it a lot of different ways. And I think all the great ones have had to do that at some point.
I want to touch on Brian Antoine real fast. So it's his 3rd game back after injury.
Yeah.
I feel like when we're talking a couple months from now, he's going to be a big part of what Villanova's doing because he was a 5-star recruit. He's dealt with just terrible injury luck. I think when it matters and we're seeing Villanova in the Sweet 16 Elite 8, Brian Antoine's going to be a big reason why they're there because the depth for Villanova was an issue early in the season. As they get a guy like Brian Antoine back, played 25 minutes today, it might take him some time to get going, but he's a really talented player that I think could be a massive factor for Villanova.
Well, we've gotten close to the halfway point of the show, and we've got the mid-major expert on here tonight. We're going to get to Alabama and their win over Florida coming up. So SEC fans, it just means more. We're going to get to you here in a few moments. But I got Sean Paul on here tonight, so I got to do the mid-major minute. One of the headliners tonight, Chattanooga and Wofford. Chattanooga comes away with this win, 75-67, among some other thrillers around the mid-majors. How about ETSU? They beat VMI 80-79 this evening. Furman takes a tight one over UNC Greensboro by 4. There were a bunch of different ones tonight. I don't know if you want to start with Chattanooga Wofford. I don't know if you want to go in a totally different direction. Sean Paul, where are you taking us here on this mid-major minute?
I want to talk about Chattanooga for sure, because this is a team I thought Chattanooga and Furman, they're going to be the top 2 in the SoCon. I thought Chattanooga would win the league. They're clearly the best team in that league this season because they have dynamic guard play, a great duo of Malachi Smith and David Jean-Baptiste, 2 guys that are experienced college basketball players. Jean-Baptiste became the all-time made 3-point leader at Chattanooga today with 241, I believe. They combined for 41 points. They were just unstoppable, and when it mattered, they made big plays, and that's what they're going to do throughout SoCon play. That's why I think they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. And when you're picking your bracket and you see the Chattanooga Mocs as a 12 or a 13 seed, I think you got to look closely at it because they're a team that's going to win a game in the NCAA tournament, I feel like. And you look at what they did today, they didn't have Silvio D'Souza, the Kansas transfer. He was out. They were able to win despite that. Chattanooga is really, really good.
Well, I tell you what, if the ACC is only going to get one bid, like we jokingly say, we need the mid-major minute to be longer than just a minute. We need to probably extend that.
I could go longer.
Because you got to have 68
teams. An hour, Steve.
You got to have 68 teams. And so, but I watched Chattanooga and Murray a couple weeks ago, and Malachi Smith. Great game. I think Malachi Smith was 13 for 15 from the field. Tevin Brown was phenomenal. I've seen him play twice. He's had 30-plus both games. He's one of the best 3-point shooters to ever come through Murray, but I think he can do more than that. But Chattanooga is a very, very good team, and they've done a terrific job there the last couple of years.
Tell you what, the SoCon is loaded.
Shout out to VMI. I mean, you mentioned them too. Shout out to them because Dan Earl is one of the most underrated coaches in America. He is such a good coach. I mean, The way they run offensively, Jake Stevens this year has been one of the best big men in the country. He can light it up from outside. He can drive you to the basket. He has good ball handling ability. I really like Jake Stevens. Camden Kerfman. If you look at what VMI has done with their guards throughout the last number of years, Bubba Parham, he was great, transfers to Georgia Tech. Travis Evie, he was getting really good. He transferred to Rice. Greg Parham, he was really good last year. He transfers to South Alabama, and now they have Camden Kerfman, who's averaging 18 points per game. That pipeline of Keydek guards has been awesome, and they continue to churn them out year after year. That's what's really special about that program.
Yeah, he plays a unique style. And, one team in there too, Bucky McMillan at Samford, and they're picked bottom 9th, 10th, I think, in the SoCon. And I've got a lot of respect for that league. Like we touched on, very, very good mid-major league. But, they wanted Ole Miss going into Christmas, and they're off to a really good start. I know they lost to Mercer tonight, but, they've done some things to surprise some people. And if you get to where Samford's a tough out and Western Carolina's a tough out who won tonight, now your league starts stretching. And when you start stretching at the mid-major from 5 teams to 7 or 8 out of a 10-team league, now you really got a good league.
Man, Chattanooga is loaded. You talked a little bit about it. They've got some balance. And you think about that league tournament is really going to be intriguing because there's no question, like you said, a Chattanooga could be a 12 or a 13 that pulls it off. I'm amazed by Jake Stevens and VMI and the job that Dan Earl has done. And tonight, East Tennessee State gets them by a point. That's going to be a thrilling conference tournament. And whoever ends up claiming that ticket is going to be a very tough out that a 5 or a 4 does not want to see on that bracket at all. So good stuff there on Chattanooga. Give them credit for what they've been able to do. And look, anytime you've got a player that could easily go into a power conference and perform, that's what it ends up taking. That's how these upsets are made.
Yeah. And that league does a great job supporting our conference tournament. Asheville is a great spot. I think they just re-upped their contract with that city. It's a great sports town for college basketball in that SoCon tournament.
All right, let's get to the Southeastern Conference. Let's get to the SEC. Tonight, Alabama finds themselves down 39-36 at the half. Nate Oates calls his group into the locker room. He says this: "You guys got to be better, quote, with the blue collar stuff." And he says that's all he had to say. And what did Alabama do? They opened the second half in Gainesville on a 22-4 run. The Tide win at 83-70 at Florida. That's a quality road win. 11-3 on the season now for Nate Oates' bunch. And Steve, I'll tell you what, it would not shock me at all to see Alabama in a regional final at the top in terms of reasons. When that backcourt is meshing, Jaden Shackelford and Javon Quinterly, it's really difficult to stop their pace and their smooth games.
Yeah, and Keon Ellis was great tonight, and Juwan Gary was great. J.D. Davidson, he only has 2 points, but I think he's a phenomenal talent and guard. Obviously, he's a freshman, so there's going to be good nights and bad nights. But Nate Oates' team, even though a lot of people talk offense, when they talk about Nate Oates' team, and I'm a big fan of his and obviously Alabama's, but you just touched on is what he told his team at halftime. His Buffalo teams, his Alabama team last year was one of the top defensive teams in the country. They've got some grit to them. And I think Juwan Gary brings some of that to them, from that standpoint, filling in, with some of those guys where Petty and Herb Jones may have filled out some big roles for those guys because they lost a lot from last year. They lost some really good players, 3-4 guys playing the NBA right now. And they've picked it up. And if you watch that Tennessee game, they had to have some grit and toughness to win that game, and they've got Missouri this weekend where if you're picking the game, you're probably going to think they're going to get by that one. But man, you got a super showdown next Tuesday night in Coleman. Alabama wins the national championship. We were joking off air, and Saban brings that trophy in there Tuesday night into Coleman. That place is going to be going nuts.
And this kind of reminds me of what Archie Miller was saying on After Dark yesterday. The great teams have 2-point guards. Alabama has 3-point guards, really, if you want to say it that way. Javon Quinterly, Jaden Shackelford, and J.D. Davison, who can kind of ease into his role. He's had some big games, performed great against Gonzaga, but he can ease into being a big-time player, kind of like Jalen Suggs did last year. He didn't have to be everything for Alabama. He doesn't have to be everything for Alabama. He can kind of become that guy throughout the season. He's going to have some struggles like every freshman does, but he's obviously extremely talented. And you have Jaden Shackelford, Javon Quinterly. The defense, though, like Coach said, very good point, because their struggle so far early in the year were defensively. They were around the 50s in KenPom. They're now 41 after today. Juwan Gary is really the difference maker on that end. And I think it's crazy that Herbert Jones wasn't like a second-team All-American last year, because we saw with their defensive struggles how important he was. I mean, he's killing in the NBA. Herbert Jones was awesome.
Yeah, when they last year, there's the diversity, 1 through 4 with length and size, and you can switch everything. It just puts so much pressure on the defense and their ability to keep people in front. But they're going to be a tough out. I mean, they lose. I mean, Davidson, I know, you can look at the Davidson game, was that right before Christmas or after Christmas? But Davidson's a tough, they're not an easy out. They're not an easy out. But Alabama's had some terrific wins, and they're going to be right in the thick of it to win the SEC again.
And man, you think about this SEC race, this is going to be an absolute war to decide who ends up winning this regular season title. In fact, I would sit here and say today that this is the epitome of the case of, damn, you want that regular season championship, even over the tournament. Because regular season this year, you have numerous teams that, first off, are in the top 20, top 15 of net, if not right around there. You've got an LSU team that's number 1 in KenPom defense, best defensive team in America, according to the metrics. You have an Auburn team that I think could be the dark horse Final Four team. And I say that because everybody's talking Baylor, Duke. Like, we need to talk about Auburn in that conversation, too, when they play their best and when their front court's going. And Jabari Smith's only going to keep picking up steam. Alabama's right there with their guard play. And Kentucky, of course, you can't leave them out. There's others, too. Like, this league is stacked. I don't know who the best team in the SEC is.
Well, you got LSU and Tennessee, too.
Tennessee, too. The way they defend.
Though that's terrific. But, it's funny. A couple of weeks ago, it's all right, who's the number 1 pick in the draft? Chet Holmgren or, Paulo Banchero? And now it's Jabari Smith's the number 1 pick in the draft. And so that's why with so many of these things, teams, rankings, draft picks, you got to let all this stuff play out a little bit, and I know everybody likes to make predictions and everything, but the SEC is alive and well. And there was a couple years back where everybody was, kicking them and, saying, hey, 3-bid league. Years ago back, I remember when the team, you had Kentucky years at late 90s, it was mid-90s, it was Kentucky National Championship, Arkansas National Championship. It's got that kind of feel because of how good these top teams are. And it's deep. It's 5-6 teams at the top.
I think Auburn's going to win the league in my mind. And here's the main reason why. I thought they would really struggle without Alan Flanagan, who I would have had as a conference preseason player of the year. Had an Achilles injury. He's back. He missed a game the other day, but he's played a few games. He should sounded like medical reason, the official Auburn account tweeted. So he should be back here pretty soon, I would guess. So if Alan Flanagan, it's going to probably take him a minute to get back to what he was last year. But that's the guy who's going to play in the NBA. Like if he went to the draft last year, he probably would have been a 2nd-round pick. So you get Flanagan back once he's doing what he's doing. Jabari Smith could easily be the first pick. Wendell Green's been a dynamite transfer addition. And Walker Kessler, of course, is just fantastic. I love your take there, Fanta. They're a dark horse Final Four team because they have the talent to do so. Bruce Pearl's a great coach. They could definitely be cutting down nets.
Oh, that's an Auburn team that could be right there. And Bruce Pearl is one hell of a coach. I think KD Johnson's a major key as well to that group. He's actually been off a little bit from the field lately, but again, a guy that's averaging 12 points per game and has the ability to just package shot making together throughout the course. They can skin a cat in different ways. Auburn really can.
Yeah, and the way they defend and they get after you, and they just put so much pressure on the ball and denying and keeping things on a side. But when everything goes wrong, they got Kessler at the back of the rim. At the front of the rim that can change shots, block shots. That's a huge, huge difference.
You know what,
He
Coach?
blocks everything.
Coach, I was talking earlier today with another coach, and it's so simple, but yet I hadn't heard the phrase before, like uttered as simple as it was. Great shooting teams still miss half the shots they take.
Yeah.
So you better have somebody in front of the rim that can clean things up. They've got that.
Yeah. And that's a big, big difference. When you look at the elite teams, defensive teams that you've seen over the years, and just being in that league, it sparks, Chris Beard had a great team, that went to the Final Four, but Tariq Owens, man, was the back of that defensive line. He blocked everything around the rim. He was phenomenal. But Kessler, man, when I was watching the LSU game the other night, kind of breaking that down, he blocks everything, challenges everything.
Let's turn to the Big 12. Iowa State beats Texas Tech 51-47. Now, Texas Tech was without Terrence Shannon in this game. They were without Kevin McCullers in this game. I mean, that's really, really tough on the Red Raiders. Just 7 players play in this game. You're basically down in a situation like this with Kevin O'Banner. You're in a position where you have Bryson Williams, and you're in a position where now you're relying on certain guys that just, they're not what Terrence Shannon is to this basketball team. They're not. And Texas Tech fought like you would expect them to do. It was an ugly basketball game. But this kind of gets back into the big picture thought of how do teams, like this should not hurt Texas Tech whatsoever. And to me, it's a wash. I can't properly evaluate Texas Tech when they're without McCullers and Terrence Shannon. Right, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, you look at their stats. Kevin McCullough leads them in rebounding. He leads them in assists. He leads them in points. Shannon does, but he's played less games, so however you want to take that. They were without their leading scorer either way. They were without their leading rebounder. They were without their leading assist man. And Clarence Nadolny, he had to pretty much play point guard the entire game. And while he's capable, he's a good player, he's been more of a reserve throughout his career. He hasn't played in a starting role very often. They didn't have Malik Wilson also, who's a good point guard. They didn't have Daniel Batcho, who's been a very good defender coming over from Arizona. So they were extremely shorthanded, and I come away impressed that this game was even competitive. They led the game late briefly. I thought they could lose this game by like 15-20, and they stayed competitive. They had a chance to win this game in a very hostile environment against a really good Iowa State team. That's going to be a team that's going to be a game that helps this team grow throughout the year.
Yeah, but it's huge for Iowa State because at the end of the day, it's a win over Texas Tech, which is a top 25 team right now, and it's a top 50 net win, and it's a Big 12 win after a huge, tough battle against Baylor. And they got 2 road games coming up, I think, at Oklahoma and at Kansas this week. It was a game they needed to get, and those kids responded, and made tough plays. To Texas Tech is not easy to play against. I mean, they make it hard for you in every form or fashion. And with the lineup they had, it was probably even harder in the second half. And I didn't see, much the second half, saw a little bit, but, Iowa State will take that and move on, learn from that. But that's at the end of the day, when you come March and you're getting ready to NCAA tournament time, that's a win that's going to move the needle for Iowa State for sure. That's huge for them.
Tell you what, with Iowa State, what I've noticed about their winning formula, which they're 13-1 after this win. I don't care how you did it. You're right. Like, you're 13-1 in this sport. These are weird times for everybody. If you're 13-1, kudos to you. They have been a team that time and again, when they need a timely play or shot, Isaiah Brockington has made it for this Cyclone squad. Coach, what is it about Brockington that makes him different?
Well, I've just seen a little bit of him, but obviously left-handed, can score at a lot of different levels, was a really good player at Penn State, came in as a double-figure guy, plays both ends of the floor. But the biggest thing for Iowa State, I think their backcourt's terrific. With the 2 Big Ten transfers, been huge for them. Obviously, the freshman Hunter's been good. Their role players have filled their job. But at the end of the day, the way they compete on the defensive end, and make it tough for the other team's offense and the way they turn you over And the way they compete on the defensive end has been huge, and it's been a big key to their start.
And Tyrese Hunter is really good too. He hasn't been a consistent scorer yet, but what he does on the defensive end is very impressive, pressuring the ball, forcing guards into making bad decisions. He seems very advanced for a freshman, and he reminds me a lot of former UNC Greensboro standout Isaiah Miller. Both are smaller, but both are super athletic. Both are great defending the ball. Neither are great shooters. I think Hunter will mold into being a better shooter over time, but that's a guy that's going to play in the NBA. He's a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, Tyrese Hunter's only lost 2 games, I think, in the last 3 years of basketball.
Wow.
I mean,
He's a winner.
got a winning DNA. And so he's a great fit there for them and their staff.
So Iowa State, they come away with that win over Texas Tech, and that's in the Big 12 tonight. In the Big 10, looking at that league, we talked about it a little bit before we came on the air, but it's really something, guys, because the Penn State Nittany Lions get another Big Ten victory, and tonight it comes at Northwestern, 74-70. I'm surprised by this, to be candid. I like this Northwestern team, but Penn State goes in and they get the win. They're 7-5 on the year, and the reason why is Seth Lundy. Seth Lundy had 23 points in this win. That's a terrific win for that staff, for Penn State, and for the Nittany Lions, who a little bit of a surprise here. I got to be honest. That's a great win for them on the road over Northwestern.
I didn't think they'd beat Indiana either. So it's been a good couple of games for them.
Yeah, last 2 games been terrific. I mean, to beat Indiana at home, it's kind of like we talked about when you beat Carolina and Duke. You know, you don't ask questions. I mean, you beat Indiana, that kind of program, and, you know, the tradition that they have, that's huge. And then you go on the road. And they're down. I mean, they're down really for 36 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, and they come away with another win. That's a great, week so far, starting off, Saturday, or whenever Sunday, and then on to, Wednesday night here.
Jalen Pickett's been great for them, the Siena transfer. He's won a lot of games throughout his college career, never played in the tournament, but Siena's always been really good with him. They were the favorites to win the MAC last year. They lost to Iona in the first round of the conference tournament, but he's averaging 12, 4, and 4. He had 19 points today. He was great. He was the biggest reason why they won today. And when you have an experienced point guard with size, with the field Jalen Pickett has, he can help you win a lot of games in the Big Ten.
Elsewhere in the Big Ten, Michigan State beats Nebraska 79-67. The Spartans, in my opinion, are a quiet 13-2 nationally. Like, I think people watch them on opening night. And Steve, you said this earlier. Like, everybody makes their take and they don't really revisit it.
Yeah.
Sparties get better. They're getting better by the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, their 2 losses are Baylor and Kansas on neutral floors. I mean, they're 2 top 6 teams in the country. But, we talked about Tom Izzo Sunday after they came back second half and beat Northwestern. I mean, it's hard to ever count them out. When you talk about winning Big Ten championships and winning the Big Ten, they just got too much toughness and grit up there, and and they've got a stretch here. They got to go to Michigan Tuesday night next week, or their next game, I believe, is at Michigan, and then they've got home games with Minnesota, Northwestern. If they can get that Michigan game, man, they can get a good little streak together here. Max
Christie, 21 points today. I think the thing about him is he was able to ease into what he's doing. If he can continue this kind of play, I was like, all right, well, if Max Christie's not a 15-point-per-game guy from day one, how good can Michigan State really be? The answer is really good, because now he's rounding into that form.
Well, they're old too. I mean, Max Christie's a freshman, but then what is it? 4 of their top 6 guys are seniors and juniors.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're old, and you even look at a great Baylor team last year, I mean, they were old. And when you're old, especially in the landscape that we're in right now, that's huge. It's huge.
I'm going to make a big take tonight on this show with 10 minutes left. And I'm telling you that the people over at Sleepers did not put me up to this. I'm starting to buy. I think that Michigan State could end up winning the Big Ten regular season championship. I really do.
I think that's true. Yeah.
And the reason why, Max Christie, you're right. Like, that's a process. It's a process to enter into the fold. But who better to go through that process with than Tom Izzo?
Yeah, because he's going to be on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it's going to be accountability. It's going to be, I'm going to demand you to do things like this. And we talked about Max Christie, run your own race the other day. Like, just because you're a top heralded kid coming in, it may not happen right away. You know what I mean? It may take till January, February, just like they used to talk about when you recruit junior college transfers. You recruit them to really get a good year and a half from them, or maybe even just a year, their senior year, because it took time to understand the system and grow and develop, and that's why it's hard when if you say Purdue in the field, and I know that's been a big question that we've always thrown around on this show. As good as Purdue is, and as phenomenal of a job of a team of Matt Painter's done, and that team is, you can easily start out in the Big Ten 1-2 because the league's so good. Number one, but number two, when you say the field, you got Michigan State in the field, you got Illinois in the field, you got some teams that it's hard to say, man, I got all these teams and I don't want to take the field. But everybody in that league is going to go through a 1-2 spurt or a 1-3 spurt. So it's going to come back around for Purdue, as we go, because they play 22 league games.
For sure. The other thing that I would say, Sean, is as much as Max Christie took time to become accustomed to Michigan State basketball and college basketball, it was going to be a transition for Tyson Walker to go from Northeastern to East Lansing. And Tyson Walker in November is not who Tyson Walker was tonight. 10 points, 5 assists. It's not on Christie. Not everything's on Christie. They've got other pieces who have also evolved, and that allows Christie to not have this facilitator, lead playmaker always be on his back. Walker can be the playmaker for the Spartans. He was tonight.
I think I said this on the last show I was on with you, Fanta. It happens a lot with these mid-major guards that are going up. It's kind of like you said, it's a transition. It takes time. And sometimes when you're a high usage player at your previous school, you want to be a little more passive. You're not as aggressive. I feel like we've noticed that a lot recently. Devontae Jones was kind of the same way. These were guys that weren't taking a lot of threes. It's not because they can't. They've always been very capable of doing so on a high volume level. They just want to get others involved and show that they can make plays for others and not try to take over the game themselves. But sometimes that almost hurts the team when you're not trying to score the ball. Tyson Walker is a really good shooter. He's a really good defender. He can score in a lot of different ways. And I think it's a great point. He's a 6 point per game guy right now. He could easily be a 12 point per game guy. I mean, he's that kind of talent level. And another guy I want to touch on is Marcus Bingham Jr. 3 years. He was okay. He came in occasionally, but it was obvious that he was overmatched at times in the Big Ten. Got to learn from guys like Xavier Tillman and Nick Ward. He had some good guys to learn from, and now he's really came into his own as a senior. 10 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 3 blocks per game. He's been fantastic for the Spartans this season, and I think he's a big reason of why they've been so successful this year.
Yeah, that too. And I just think the depth, when you look at when you have a team where you've got 7 guys averaging 7 points or more, 4 guys with double figures, you can have certain guys can have bad nights and you can still win. And that's what it takes to be really, really successful.
All right, let's look ahead to tomorrow. It's a Thursday matinee, 2 Eastern time. It's the top 2 teams in Sean Paul's mid-major top 25. It's Loyola Chicago. It's San Francisco. How about the fact that Loyola Chicago over their last 32 games is 28-4? Just the way that they've performed. On the other side, you have a San Francisco squad that I love. I mean, I think Khalil Shabazz is a guy that's not even getting enough attention nationally. You think about what they have from Gabe Stefanini on down. This is a San Francisco Dons team that gets more of America's attention in a loaded West Coast Conference. I love this game. I love that it's happening. Sean Paul, what do you expect in this particular matchup?
I wouldn't be surprised if the first 10 minutes or so the game is pretty sloppy because these teams have had a little bit of a layoff since the last time they played. Loyola Chicago hasn't played in almost a month. Like, it's been a while since Loyola Chicago's been on the floor. If that's how it's going to be early on, I think that favors Loyola Chicago because San Francisco turns the ball over a little too much. But here's the thing with San Francisco. Their defense is the reason why they're so good right now. They're 21st in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency. And when I think of San Francisco basketball in recent years, I think of offense. But they haven't been great at offense all the time. They're a heavy usage three-point shooting team. 40+% of their shots come from three-point range. Jamari Bouye is a great shooter. They have great shooters across the floor, but the additions of Ewan Masalski and Patrick Tepe have been great additions because they add physicality down low. If you have a physical big man, the opposing team, they can defend them easily. They rebound. They do everything you want. They help a winning team. Both are really experienced teams. They both are two of the older teams in college basketball. And the funniest thing about it is they have two of the younger coaches in college basketball. So I think it's going to be a very competitive game, and there's really nothing to lose for either team because it's probably going to be a quadrant one game on both sides. I think San Francisco has the edge because they have a bona fide number one scorer with Jamari Bouye, while Loyola Chicago has a few options. Lucas Williamson, Ryan Schwieger. They have a lot of scoring options, but they don't have that one guy. But Drew Valentine's done it differently. Loyola Chicago is number one in effective field goal percentage this year. Their identity in recent years has been defense. This year, they've been elite on the offensive end and really good defensively. So it's kind of interesting to look at it that way, but I think San Francisco pulls off the tight win.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think it is a big game because I think this is a game when you look at if some of these high major leagues like we talked about aren't going to fill the spots, and Loyola doesn't win a conference tournament, and the West Coast Conference may already have Gonzaga that's in and BYU that's in and St. Mary's possibly. Well, now the winner of this game, this could go a long way, for that last 11 seed or that last 12 seed. It has that old bracket buster feel. I think I saw somebody say that today, back in the day. And I thought the bracket buster was great for the top teams. I thought it was great, because you had some really good matchups and you got some ESPN time. But I think we talked a little bit off air about mid-major coach of the year at the halfway point. I think, we kind of play it off, tomorrow, but I mean, Valentine's done a terrific job. Replaced Porter so far. Their only two losses, Michigan State and Auburn. Both teams have beaten Arizona State. Both teams have some good wins so far, but I think credit both those coaches for saying, hey, we need to play. We need a game, and we're going to fly and meet halfway in Utah, and we're going to play at Salt Lake Community College. And I'm sure they're going to pack that place out, and it's going to be a fun environment. Mm-hmm. And that's what it should be right now. We got so many things we're dealing with. Those kids want to play. Those coaches want to coach. Man, that's going to be a heck of a game. And it's a shame it isn't on national TV, tomorrow in the afternoon.
You know what I love about both these teams? They're both averaging right around 10 threes a game. I mean, both these teams can let it fly.
Modern day basketball.
Yeah, I'm expecting the ball to fly. I'm expecting, maybe a little bit of sloppiness early, but you're going to see threes aplenty. That's part of the formula for both of them. And you're right, Loyola Chicago, this is not a team with a Jamari Bouye. It's not a team that has that 17, 18 point per game score, but they do a terrific job, Sean, of getting the game at their tempo, in their style. You look at what they've done from a ball management standpoint, their turnover margin's in a good place. They don't make a lot of mistakes. It's a team that you do almost to win by 1. You got to win by 10. That's the type of thing when you're playing Loyola Chicago. But make no mistake about it. San Francisco can do it here in this game. And I would lean USF in this game. I would lean with the Dons. But this is a great bracket buster game. And credit to both the coaches. It's everything right about the sport. You got to do it. I
like Loyola, though. Give me Loyola.
I think it'll be close. I mean, if Loyola Chicago turns San Francisco over, I think they'll win the game. But I think overall having a Bouye gives San Francisco the edge. But you could tell me this can go either way, and I would believe you. I don't have a strong prediction. I hope it's just a great game.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I'm with you that Jamari Bouye is the guy. If Loyola finds a defensive formula against him, then we're going to be talking very differently. But Bouye is the best player on the floor in this game, right, Sean?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you look at the versatility from a guy like Lucas Williamson. He brings a lot of value defensively too, 11 points per game. So he's not quite the scorer, but I think that's probably who we could see on Boyer defensively, maybe Marquise Kennedy. I'm curious to see what Loyola Chicago does on Boyer. It'll be very interesting.
All right, I'm going to end with this here. We got about 2 minutes left. We do tip-ins at the end of shows that I host here on After Dark. Tip-ins are rapid fire, quick, your thoughts. So, Coach Prohm, outside of Baylor, Duke, Gonzaga, UCLA, and Purdue, going to take them out of the equation. Outside those teams, you get to ride one team's horse here the remainder of the season. A team outside that top five that you like, the upside, the ability to score the ball, their defensive capabilities, their ability to potentially get to New Orleans. Who's that team that's outside the top five that could cut down the nets?
Yeah, I think you touched on them earlier, and the team I wrote down was Auburn. I like the way they're trending. Obviously, Jamari Smith and Kessler in the front court. If Flanagan continues to get healthy, some of the young guards get better, and then I think Bruce Pearl's as good as there is in this game, coaching the game. I like Auburn.
John?
I'm going to go Arizona because they have the athleticism. They can shoot the ball. They have NBA talent. Tommy Lloyd's done a great job. They're really tough defensively. They push the tempo. Give me the Wildcats.
I'm with Coach. My answer was Auburn. I'm going to stick to it. I like the Tigers. I'm excited for that Alabama-Auburn game coming up next week. So let's stay right there. Alabama, Georgia. Who's winning the national championship on Monday night, Coach?
Oh, Alabama. Alabama. Alabama's going 2-0 Monday and Tuesday. I've got Auburn still, but those two games, Alabama over Georgia and Alabama over Auburn Tuesday night.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why Georgia's favored in the game. I'm not a college football analyst, but I feel like if Alabama's in the championship game, you just got to make them the favorites because they always seem to find a way.
And Field of 12 is going to be in Indianapolis. So all those watching, these guys are heading on the ground. They are going to be right there in the home city of the national championship game. They are going to be, I had it here earlier, they're going to be at a local bar with their full cast of characters. So you're not going to want to miss that. I mean, that's going to be some great stuff. Those guys are there on Sunday and Monday. It's a loaded crew. Very exciting. They're heading to Ellison Brewing in Indianapolis. Sunday night, all day on Monday. Be there for us. Title game watch party for the Field of 12.
You can't bet against Nick Saban. I mean, that's just you can't, right?
No, it's like betting against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. You can't do it.
You can't. I'm going with Saban too. I got Alabama. And be sure to catch us Ellison Brewing Sunday and Monday. All right, Coach, last question. After a big win, you get one drink of choice. What are you sipping on?
Oh man, if I'm going alcohol, I'm probably having a Bud Light Lime or a Corona. If it was alcohol,
Bud Light Lime.
But man, probably after a good win, man, I'm just picking up some good food and bring them to the house. And you still got to go home and watch the tape, even though you had a great win. And sit with your laptop, watch the game, eat your bad food, and drink your Gatorade. But there's nothing better than a good win now. The road wins are the best, but there's nothing better than winning.
What's the Sean Paul late night snack or beverage? Go.
That's a tough question. I mean, I'm a water guy. I drink pretty exclusively water, so that is usually my beverage of choice. But I'll say I like Cheez-Its. I eat a lot of Cheez-Its, so I'll say that's my late night snack.
I freaking love it.
Hey, if you beat Kansas at home, you're not eating Cheez-Its, brother. You're having something better than that.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you right now. After a great game, 1, Miller High Life, champagne of beers. 2, Coach, being I'm a Seton Hall alum. I learned from Kevin Willard, get a big ass bottle of Merlot and don't look back. That's my post-game drink selection. And that's going to do it for us. We hope you enjoy a Miller High Life or whatever the cocktail it is. And we're going to be back tomorrow, 11 Eastern time. Enjoy afternoon basketball between San Francisco and Loyola Chicago, and a loaded day of college hoops. For Sean Paul, for Coach Prohm, I'm John Fan.